As much of the country is bracing for the 2024 election, or at least the campaigning and posturing, it's the 2020 election that's making news here in Georgia this week. We're now seeing 5 pages from a special grand jury report on the investigation into possible criminal activity surrounding that election. Joining me now is Todd, moderator of NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck, these pages don't tell the entire story, and ultimately it's going to be up to the Fulton County District Attorney to bring any charges. The Trump side, though, is taking a victory lap here on social media. Is that premature?
Yeah, I don't know why they're taking a victory lap. I would find it premature. Look, I was surprised that any part of this grand jury report was released before the district attorney had a chance to decide if to indict anybody, and if so, who to indict. So I was surprised by any release. Perhaps that's what the Trump team is reading into it, that somehow the judge wouldn't have even released this little bit. But I don't know why you would take a victory lap when the report also said this grand jury's unanimous in believing there was nothing nefarious with the election in Georgia, and a majority thought perjury had been committed by one or more witnesses. So I don't quite know what that victory lap would be just yet, but I still am a bit, my head scratching a little bit at the decision by the judge to release even what they released, because just by, the whole due process argument, are you denying due process to those that may be accused down the road? Yeah, they didn't name the person they think who perjured themselves, but now we all know who showed up in front of them. Are you the liar? Are you the, I do question why it was put out in this piecemeal form at all.
Yeah, a lot of folks will be continuing to follow that. This Sunday, you'll be speaking with Secretary of State Antony Blinken about a range of topics, including our relations with China. President Biden addressed the decision to shoot down multiple objects that may or may not have anything to do with China. But at the same time, what have the last 2 weeks done to U.S.-China relations?
Well, I think it's certainly made them ratcheted things up. I think all this talk of where the White House, we're not in a Cold War, we're in a Cold War. This, as a kid who grew up, as a Gen Xer here, right? Kid who grew up in the 70s and 80s, it's been nothing but Soviet Union flashbacks this week with the sort of overreactions, underreactions, things like this. So, look, I think if we didn't realize it before, we do know it now. This is a tense relationship. Unlike the Soviet Union, we have economic ties. It was easier to have a Cold War with the Soviets because we didn't need any products for them. This is different with China, so that's why I think you have politicians trying to dial back the rhetoric, and even on the Chinese side. So look, I do think that we have to sort of hit the reset button with China, come up with contingencies about, all right, look, we're going to spy on each other. What are sort of the guardrails on our surveillance on each other so that we don't do something that accidentally triggers a war, right? So I do think that's the next phase of our relationship with China. I'll be curious to see how much the Secretary of State talks about it publicly.
Yeah. Now, on the road to 2024, you'll also have the former governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, on Meet the Press with you, who may, in fact, run for president. So also this week, we saw Senator Tim Scott giving what sounded like a campaign speech in South Carolina, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis going to speak to a police union in Chicago. So do you think we're seeing some test run here by who might be potential candidates?
Well, I definitely think that Nikki Haley's decision to make it official has got everybody else suddenly realizing, hey, they need to get out there more, even if they're not officially in. When Nikki Haley sent the press release out of her big announcement, it was within 24 hours Tim Scott suddenly lined up these visits. He had a speech in Charleston, and then he had a trip to Iowa that they made public. That's when we found out about Ron DeSantis going to Chicago to talk to that police union. I do think her announcement has sort of lit a fire, and you're just going to start seeing more of this. Every week now we'll have 2 or 3 candidates showing up in Iowa, South Carolina, New Hampshire, things like that. And we're probably within 2 or 3 weeks away where almost on a weekly basis we may see a new candidate jump in the race. I suspect it'll be a couple more weeks before we see the next one. But I think starting in mid-March, going through Memorial Day, I wouldn't be surprised if we got about another 6 to 8 jump in that time period.
Meet the Press airs Sunday morning at 10 on 11 Alive. Chuck, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you.